Before we start, my mom works in an office and stories like this hit home for me. This isn't just content for use, it's based on real situations people face every day. The goal is here so you can recognize yourself in these moments and not repeat the same mistakes. And of course, all names, companies and location are fictional or changed for privacy.
I knew something was off the second I saw my API key light up like a Christmas tree at 6:47 a.m. It was a back-end ping, buried deep in the access logs where no one should have been digging unless they had either my permission or a death wish. The system flagged it red, tagged with a device ID I hadn't seen before. When I expanded the metadata, I stopped breathing for a second. Alana Royce, brand new ops manager with a LinkedIn page full of inspirational quotes, a surgically perfected grin, and an MBA she apparently thought doubled as a locksmith license. She was trying to clone my work, quietly, sloppily, from her company-assigned laptop like she didn't even care who'd see it. That told me one thing. She thought she was untouchable. Every Monday, like clockwork, I coordinated logistics syncs, patched rollout contingencies, and mapped supply chain flow from coast to coast using a system I had built from scratch during the pandemic. While the company barely limped through Zoom meetings, I coded through nights with no lights in the kitchen. And now this smug newcomer thought she could just drag and drop my framework into her toy box? Real quick, before I dive deeper, if you're listening and haven't hit subscribe or liked the video, this is your moment. 97% of you haven't yet, and it seriously helps the team keep making these stories. All right, back to the chaos. I sent a single email to HR, not dramatic, not even aggressive. Just a quiet flag with the clone attempt log and Alana's device ID attached. I CC'd her too. Figured she had the right to know I saw her sticky fingers. And then I waited. 20 minutes. 30. Nothing. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. They'd forgotten something crucial. The entire integration suite, logistics syncs, inventory optimizations, region-based vendor reroutes wasn't company property. It was mine. Licensed through Crane Logic Solutions, the engineering firm I founded before they ever offered me a badge. The legal clause was clear. 3 years exclusivity, renewals bound by quarterly performance metrics, and immediate custodial withdrawal in the event of unauthorized tampering or disrespectful conduct. Clause 7.4b. I wrote it myself. HR had signed it. Legal had stamped it. And now Alana's little data grab had just triggered it. At 9:36 a.m., I got the invite. HR, no subject line, just a timestamp and a room number. When I walked in, they didn't even look up from their laptops. Didn't offer coffee, just got right into it. We're adjusting compensation based on credentials, the woman from HR said, not bothering to hide her boredom. Alana holds a master's in business. You're just an engineer. Just an engineer. I looked at the framed certificate on the wall behind her, some meaningless award for excellence in diversity hiring, which I now realize was code for hire someone shiny and forget the woman who built your damn backbone. Then she said it. Know your place. It didn't even sting. It was too absurd for that. I think I let out a soft laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. They thought I was a legacy piece of furniture. They thought I wouldn't leave. They thought I didn't know exactly what I held in my hands. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just nodded once and walked out. At 9:41 a.m., I typed one sentence into my phone and hit send. I resign. Effective immediately under Section 7.4b, upon project breach. I attached the clause. Didn't matter if they read it now. The trigger was active, custody revoked, licenses voided, autosync shut down. Every system they touched from that moment forward was a corpse in a pretty dress. By the time I reached the parking lot, I could feel the chill in the air, not from the wind, but from the silence coming through my phone. My badge buzzed red at the exit gate. I dropped it in the bin and left. 44 minutes later, the VP was on my driveway, and I hadn't even finished my coffee. When I say they didn't flinch, I mean it. Not a blink. Not even a half-hearted, we value your contributions. The HR rep, a guy named Thomas who wore irony-free suspenders and probably practiced power stances in the mirror, just slid a sheet across the table like it was my obituary. We're aligning compensation with formal qualifications, he said, tone flat as printer paper. Alana holds an MBA from Stanford. You? Well, your record shows technical excellence, but no advanced managerial training. That pause before the word but told me everything I needed to know. Then came the cherry on the passive-aggressive sundae. "You're just an engineer." I blinked once. "Excuse me?" He leaned back, arms folded like he'd just cracked some grand moral puzzle. "Look, we appreciate your years here, but we're moving forward. Leadership needs credentials." The audacity, the revisionist history. Like I hadn't pulled this company through 2 supply chain meltdowns, a warehouse systems failure in Phoenix, and the Great Dispatch firewall crash of Q2 last year that almost cost them their Amazon contract. Like Alana hadn't just tried to copy my API key from her laptop not 12 hours into her first day. "Know your place," he added. And there it was. The phrase that aged like sour milk the second it hit the air. I looked around the room. Beige walls, windowless, the same clock I stared at 5 years ago when I renegotiated our Tier 3 vendor encryption flow, the same table where I once outlined the North Hub rollout by hand while the board VP took credit with a forced grin. They really thought I was going to sit here and take it. I didn't get angry. That would have given them too much power. Instead, I just stood, calmly, slowly, reached for my phone, typed exactly 1 sentence: "I resign," effective immediately under Section 7.4b upon project breach. Attached the clause, even bolded the relevant line in the PDF. The clause HR never bothered to read the first time because they assumed custodial continuity was just legal fluff, but it wasn't. It was the kill switch. Clause 7.4b. In the event of disrespectful conduct, demotion, or breach of custodial boundary, the engineer may resign without notice and revoke all live use licenses within 45 minutes of formal notice. Guess what qualified as disrespectful conduct? Telling your infrastructure lead to know her place while actively allowing a new hire to attempt back-end duplication from a non-permissioned device. I had the logs, I had the timestamps, I had the damn device ID. I hit send at 9:41 a.m. sharp. Walked out with nothing but my car keys and the satisfaction of knowing the warehouse dashboards were about 15 minutes from going completely dark. As I passed reception, the girl at the front smiled like nothing had happened. I gave her a nod. She wouldn't know until later that the shipment window for the southern region was about to miss 3 compliance syncs, and every scanner from Reno to Tallahassee would start blinking red. They had no idea the system didn't belong to them. They thought they could gaslight me with credentials and a gold-framed MBA certificate. But those credentials didn't mean jack when every logistics ping, every tracking link, every dispatch lane depended on an invisible framework only I understood, and legally still owned. When I stepped into the parking lot, the sun hit my face and I realized I wasn't angry. I was free, and 44 minutes later, that freedom would start costing them tens of thousands per hour. I didn't slam the door on my way out, didn't storm the parking lot or peel out like some overcooked movie scene. I just walked. Left my badge on the table next to the untouched HR coffee and my laptop, still open on the live deployment dashboard, sitting exactly where it had always been, humming like nothing was about to implode. No one followed me. No one even looked up. They still hadn't realized what I'd done. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was 9:57 a.m. I made a cup of coffee, sat on the porch, sun was warm, my phone was quiet. At exactly 10:02 a.m., the first alert came through on the admin relay. Automated. Cold. A courtesy notification from the infrastructure node that said, "Remote session revoked. Escrow lock engaged. Warehouse visibility suspended." Translation? They were blind. Completely. The north and south logistics hubs lost live tracking. Inventory queues started choking. Barcode scans timed out. Driver routes glitched mid-run and rerouted themselves to 404 pages. Dispatchers couldn't even print pick lists, let alone fulfill regional orders. Every bridge they'd relied on was now a rope, and I'd cut it clean. By 10:07 a.m., they tried rebooting from the mirror install, but the mirror was dummy synced. No access tokens, no vendor IDs. All of that had lived under the custodial license, my license, and it was gone. By 10:13 a.m., Carl's name showed up on my phone. I didn't answer. By 10:18 a.m., the errors started cascading. Every dashboard began flashing a red banner with the words, "System custody revoked. Contact license authority." Alana must have been spinning by then. I pictured her in that obnoxiously modern collaboration nook she claimed boosted productivity, tapping her screen like it owed her a favor, trying to run commands she didn't understand, yelling at IT while legal reread the contract she never cared to skim. I didn't feel sorry for her. At 10:25 a.m., I saw the black sedan roll up like a hearse, trying to pretend it was still a Lexus. Carl Morgan stepped out, his collar unbuttoned and sweat glistening across his forehead, like the truth had finally started boiling. He looked like a man who just realized the house he built was sitting on a sinkhole. I didn't get up, just sipped my coffee and waited. He approached slowly, like he wasn't sure if I'd punch him or offer him a chair. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice thin, a little too rehearsed. I let the silence stretch until the awkwardness thickened. "I assumed you were informed," I said finally. "Clause 7.4b, effective upon breach." He swallowed. I didn't know it would. That's the point of a custodial clause, Carl. It activates when the custodian is disrespected. No further permission required. You signed off on that 3 years ago. He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You left us blind," he whispered. "No," I corrected. "You did." He started to speak again, but I raised a hand. "I'm not negotiating on my porch." The look in his eyes then, pure panic wrapped in the realization that the person they thought was just an engineer held the keys to every engine in the damn fleet, was almost poetic. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile, but I'll admit this much. The silence between us said everything that needed saying. He stood there for another full minute, probably trying to figure out what MBA program could have prepared him for this. Then he walked back to the car. The sun was still shining, my coffee was still hot, and somewhere across 5 states, their warehouses were still frozen in time. Tuesday morning, while I sipped coffee in socks and an oversized hoodie, they tried to pretend the plane was still flying. News came in from a former colleague. Quiet message, no emojis, just a screenshot and 3 words. "It's chaos here." They thought they could sidestep me, that if they pressed the right keys and made enough noise, the system would forget who it belonged to. But my integration suite wasn't a plug-and-play extension. It was the damn spinal cord. They were poking at a husk and hoping it'd get up and dance. At 8:17 a.m., they tried rerouting through their backup logistics plan. I had seen that plan. Alana paraded it around in one of her team slides. 2 rectangles and a green arrow, like a child's drawing of a supply chain. No redundancy, no permission tokens. No idea how the underlying frameworks actually worked. First attempt, flatlined. Second attempt, triggered a permissions lock. Third attempt, stalled mid-query with a server timeout and a blinking footer that read, "Custody authorization required." I didn't lift a finger. Didn't open my laptop. Let them spin. By noon, their Tier 2 support chain was flooded. Routing logic was offline. Tracking links for outbound freight read as invalid. Real-time pings for drivers in Ohio and Nevada were either missing or frozen on yesterday's coordinates. One guy was supposedly sitting in a parking lot in Tulsa for 4 hours before someone realized the system wasn't refreshing. Support reached out, of course. A few engineers I trained, good people, sent me gentle messages on Slack. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but do you have a minute? Any idea why the task queues aren't refreshing? Are we missing a cert?" I didn't reply. I wasn't under contract. They let me walk. Told me to know my place. My place wasn't here anymore. Alana tried throwing a patch together using open source logistics software. I could see the attempt in the log trails. They tried importing an outdated container from 2 fiscal years ago, hoping to Frankenstein it into something workable. But that suite had been deprecated, and it didn't even have the layers they needed for compliance syncs, much less live pings from autonomous loaders in the Midwest hubs. By 3:40 p.m., 6 departments were deadlocked: shipping, fulfillment, receiving, dispatch, vendor reconciliation, and warehouse operations. Couldn't generate a label, couldn't verify inventory, couldn't even print a pick list without the system throwing a 503 error. They scrambled. Called in third-party consultants, rebooted servers, tried pulling logs from their mirror install. But the mirror install wasn't a backup. It was a visual reference I maintained under limited license. It had no data authority, no keys, just a skeleton in a nice interface. And then came the Slack message. A frantic supervisor dropped a screenshot in the main ops channel. Someone forwarded it to me later. It showed a simple login screen, grayed out, locked down. Bottom right corner. Property of Crane Logic Solutions. License terminated. Contact custodian for reissue. The thread blew up. One guy asked, "Wait, this isn't ours?" Another replied, "What the hell did legal sign off on?" And then the silence came. Not the kind that settles after an argument, the kind that sinks in when a ship hits something cold and invisible, and the water starts pouring in. I watched the sun go down that night from my kitchen window. Didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel regret either. Just watched the light fade. Let the stillness wrap around me. No engines, no dashboards, just shells and silence. Wednesday morning, they dragged every department head into a glass box conference room and called it an emergency alignment session. Internally, they were calling it a system outage. Externally, they were praying no one noticed shipments hadn't moved in 48 hours. Carl tried to keep the tone professional, but the sweat on his collar betrayed the truth. It wasn't an outage, it was a collapse. And Alana? Oh, she danced. First, she blamed IT, said they failed to maintain infrastructure hygiene. Then she blamed legal, said the licensing language was ambiguous. And then, like clockwork, she turned to her favorite scapegoat, legacy tech. The woman barely knew what an API key did, but suddenly she was an expert in system decay. It's years of accumulated tech debt, she said, waving her hands like it was a TED Talk. We need modernization, agile solutions, cross-functional redundancy. Translation. She had no clue what went wrong, but if she used enough buzzwords, maybe no one would notice she was the detonator, but someone did notice. Legal had been quiet in a dangerous way. They pulled the original service agreement from the archive. Not the summary they'd been glancing at, the real one. The 48-page document I drafted with surgical precision and had signed by the COO 2 administrations ago, when they still respected infrastructure engineers instead of discarding them like packaging foam. Page 27. Clause 7.4b. Plain as day. In the event of disrespectful conduct, demotion, or breach of custodial boundary, the engineer may resign without notice and revoke all live-use licenses within 45 minutes of formal notice. There it was. Legal read it out loud. Someone reportedly dropped their coffee. Timestamp of my resignation, 9:41 a.m., timestamp of system-wide sync token disablement, 10:26 a.m., 45 minutes. Not a second more. The trigger didn't need approval. It didn't ask for confirmation. It didn't pop up a warning. It just ran. The clause had been coded into the architecture itself, buried inside the deployment hooks of the integration suite, triggering a recursive auto-nullification of all live-use tokens, regenerating the encryption layers so that even mirrored backups were rendered inert. That was the moment panic metastasized, not just because they realized they couldn't reverse it, but because they realized they had never truly understood what the system was. Alana reportedly went pale. One of the junior PMs started crying, and Carl, stoic, buttoned-up Carl, turned to the window and whispered something about needing a moment. Across the country, fulfillment centers were now glorified warehouses. Trucks were parked with nowhere to go. Drivers were idle. Dispatchers were rerouting by hand, and clients were calling hourly with words like breach and contract violation beginning to float into the air. Meanwhile, I was at home replanting a few of my patio herbs. Rosemary was dying. Not enough sun. Funny how systems need light to function, respect to survive, roots to grow. They stripped all three. And now they were discovering what happens when the backbone you thought was a vendor is actually the spine of your company. And it walks. I didn't respond to Carl's latest email. I didn't take the call from their new crisis consultant. Because there wasn't a crisis, not on my end. Just a quiet, orderly execution of terms they never respected. I warned them, just not with words. By Friday morning, the messages came in waves. Calls from unfamiliar numbers, texts from unfamiliar assistants, calendar invites from names I hadn't heard before. All carrying the same tired subtext. Please come back. Carl finally called directly. He opened with a sheepish chuckle, like we were old friends having a misunderstanding over a forgotten coffee bill. Look, he said, we've been thinking. Maybe there's a way to roll this back. We can reclassify things. Maybe treat the resignation as a pause, offer a retention bonus, smooth the optics. I didn't say anything for a moment. I wanted the silence to speak first. Then I said, "You disrespected the custodial covenant." I could hear him blink on the other end of the line. "You might have read it as legal," I continued, "but it wasn't just language, it was a boundary, and you stepped over it with both feet." He tried to shift gears, tried to sound conciliatory. "I understand that this has felt personal." "It was personal," I cut in. "You handed my work to someone who didn't understand it, tried to overwrite it without consent, and then told me to know my place. That clause was my only warning shot. You just didn't read it." He went quiet again. While we spoke, I pulled up the system logs, not because I planned to help, but because I wanted to see what they were breaking in my absence. Their latest attempts to run sandbox tests had triggered a flood of permission errors. They'd even tried spinning up a ghost instance of the live environment, which immediately locked itself upon license mismatch. Meanwhile, internal chatter leaked out. Someone forwarded me a company memo, one of those sterile, too-late attempts to control the narrative. The subject line read, "Chain of custody review underway." The body was 2 lines long. "Engineering system access will remain paused pending custodial escrow certification. All personnel are reminded to avoid unauthorized system interactions." Translation? Alana was benched. Quietly, officially, but completely. Her email bounced now. Her Slack status was frozen at away. They tried to do it discreetly. No announcement, no explanation, but people noticed. Especially the junior engineers who'd followed my build maps for 3 years and knew the entire ecosystem ran on precision, not PR. And now that system, the one that had routed hundreds of thousands of shipments across 16 regional centers, sat idle, humming in the background like a car waiting for the right key. They'd revoked her access, yes. But they hadn't earned mine back. I told Carl no, not angrily, not bitterly, just no. "I've moved on," I said. He asked what it would take. "Nothing you can offer," I answered, because what I needed wasn't money, it was respect. And you outsourced that to someone with buzzwords and a stolen password. I ended the call before he could reply. That afternoon, I received a copy of the latest ops dashboard through back channels. Across the top in bold red text was a new banner. "Active operations paused pending custodial escrow. No override access permitted." No movement, no pings, no dispatch. Just a system waiting in limbo, and a company finally learning what it cost to lose the one person who understood how it all worked. Not because she made it complicated, but because she made it right. By Monday morning, their legal team had turned into archaeologists, digging through years of contracts they once skimmed like terms of service on a toaster. I got a quiet tip from someone I used to mentor. Legal had spent the entire weekend in the war room, highlighters bleeding through paper, trying to find a single clause that gave them even partial control over the infrastructure I built. They found nothing. Every meaningful clause, every licensing agreement, every line that mattered had been countersigned by a COO who left 2 years ago. Still binding, still bulletproof, still mine. The truth hit them like an anvil. They'd inherited a system they never understood, built by a woman they never respected, held together by clauses they never read. And now it was locked behind a wall they didn't have the tools, or the keys, to access. Carl's team tried onboarding a new vendor, desperation in slow motion. They thought they could fast-track a replacement by bringing in a third-party firm from the East Coast, one that promised rapid deployment, full integration, and modern API-first infrastructure. I could have told them how that would go, but I wasn't taking their calls anymore. See, my platform didn't just use encryption, it used layered custodial encoding, a signature chain of tokens that authenticated each module through a nested sequence. Without the original seed token, issued through my firm's admin console, it was like trying to guess the safe code while the building burned down around you. They tried anyway. Installed the fallback version of the software. That failed too. The installer returned a single blinking line. Primary token required. Escrow match not found. I'd built that in after Alana's clone attempt. Quietly. Not out of spite, but out of habit. You protect what you create, and they had treated my creation like a spare tire. They didn't know the system validated identity not just through credentials, but through presence. My admin token had a heartbeat, a timestamp, a tether to my resignation. And once that line was cut, no one, not legal, not Carl, not even their shiny new vendor, could regenerate it without explicit reauthorization from me, which of course they weren't getting. Alana, from what I heard, was nowhere to be found. Some whispered she was on leave. Others said she'd been moved to a special project in another division. I didn't care either way. Her fingerprints were still on the logs. The system remembered her like a scar. Carl sent one last message through back channels. Not a request this time, just a statement. We didn't know how much it mattered. We do now. I didn't respond. Because it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't returning. Not for their guilt, not for their money, not even for their panic. They could rebuild eventually. Maybe. With the right people, the right respect, the right contracts that actually meant something. But they'd have to start over. Because the system they had relied on, the one they pretended was plug and play, easy to mimic, easy to own, was gone. It hadn't just walked out with me. It had followed the only person who ever understood it in the first place. And now it was silent, watching, waiting. Not for them, for someone who deserved it. Carl called again that Monday, and this time he didn't stumble through small talk or dress it up like an opportunity. He sounded tired, like someone who finally understood the weight of what he'd broken, but didn't know how to say sorry without choking on it. We'll triple the retainer, he said. CTO level equity, you pick the terms. I let the silence hang for a second, just long enough for him to feel how far we were from where we used to be. I've moved on, I said, steady. This isn't about money. He sighed. I could hear the static of his office behind him. Quiet now. No clicking keyboards, no frantic voices. Just that muted corporate grief when the machine stops spinning and no one remembers how to restart it. I understand, he said. And for the first time, I believed him. I didn't leave him empty-handed. I gave him a name. A former student I mentored out of a STEM program in Cincinnati. She was 26, methodical, brilliant, and most importantly, she knew how to listen. She didn't inflate her resume with words like synergize or digital pivot. She asked real questions, solved real problems, and she never once confused a credential with competence. She'll need full escrow authority, I said. No overrides, no silent updates, and you'll set up quarterly verifications with a 2-signature renewal structure. Carl didn't argue. Not this time. He agreed to everything. 3 hours later, I got a copy of the draft contract. My mentee's name sat proudly next to the words custodial lead, escrow issuer, not buried in footnotes, not slapped on as an afterthought, front and center. She called me that night, nervous, excited, overwhelmed. I talked her through it, point by point. Not just the technical pieces, but the boundaries, the dignity. You're not there to fix broken ego, I told her. You're there to keep the system honest, and if they ever make you feel small, walk. She understood. Somewhere in the background, I could hear her dog barking. She laughed and told me she was eating cold pizza off a file folder. I smiled. She was ready. Later that week, Carl issued a memo. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. Subject: recommitment to organizational humility and systems integrity. It read like a corporate apology written in legalese, but between the lines, the message was clear. Don't mistake flash for function. Don't mistake a title for the person holding it. Don't build an empire on someone's blueprint and then act surprised when it vanishes after you insult the architect. Alana, quietly reassigned. No send-off, no announcement. Her name disappeared from the internal org chart like a deleted column in Excel. I imagine she'll spin the narrative her way. Let her. The system won't forget. As for me, I didn't return. I didn't walk through those glass doors again or sit through their restructured strategy briefings. But I did watch, from afar, as they finally rebuilt with care. This wasn't revenge. It was realignment. The system had always been about trust. And now, maybe it could start earning that back. Weeks passed. Quietly. No headlines, no press releases, no grand reopening. Just a gradual resurrection of operations. Packages began moving, dashboards stopped blinking, and the supply chain slowly, cautiously restarted its breath. But everything was different. The first time I checked the new interface, pure curiosity, nothing more, I saw it. At the bottom of the admin login, where once there had been a corporate slogan and an outdated copyright line, now sat one plain sentence in clean, bold font. Custodial infrastructure licensed via Crane Logic Solutions, escrow verified, no overrides permitted. No fanfare, no callouts, but I knew what it meant. They had rebuilt it atop the truth. Carl gave a keynote 3 weeks later at a logistics conference in Chicago. I wasn't invited, didn't want to be, but a friend of mine streamed it and sent me the timestamp. I clicked it while folding laundry, expecting jargon, but instead I heard him say it. Direct, unpolished, and for once, honest. Never underestimate foundational engineers, Carl said, standing in front of a projected slide that looked suspiciously like the first architecture map I drew on a napkin 3 years ago. There were murmurs in the crowd. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He knew. And now they all would. I turned off the stream after that. Back in my new workspace, nothing fancy, just sunlight, plants, and the kind of peace I never had when I was on call at 3 a.m. for the people who didn't know the difference between a failover and a firewall. I took a long sip of coffee and stared at the blinking cursor of a new project. No gloating, no smugness, just clarity. They'd tried to reduce me to a title, tried to bury me under paper degrees and imported arrogance. But systems don't run on titles. They run on trust, on precision, on the quiet, invisible labor of people who build them brick by brick and line by line. And when that trust is broken, they don't crash all at once. They decay, unless someone is willing to start again with respect. That's what they finally did. They didn't fix it by replacing me. They fixed it by remembering who built it. You can mock the title, you can question the worth, but in the end, the systems still ran on my terms.